Hello, all you bilingual Quebecers and awakening Canadians. I admit it, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Except for a few little spots of red and orange and deep blue, the map of Quebec today is pale blue after the election this week. Many friends texted me asking what happened. Was it all fixed or, how did he win a majority? Well, take a look at this Montrealer who's literally begging for someone to explain how this happened. I think many Quebecers feel this way too.
Le peuple québécois, j'ai besoin des explications. Comment il a gagné la majorité? Je comprends pas. Après, j'ai besoin que quelqu'un m'explique. J'ai besoin que quelqu'un m'explique comment. Le comment et du pourquoi. Comme les Québécois, vous avez rien compris. J'ai besoin de comprendre parce qu'en ce moment, j'ai vraiment... I'm blown away because it's like after everything this man said during his campaign, he got elected.
Well, the sun is still shining today, but let's think twice, Quebec. Is this game over, or is there some good news in the election result? And what does it mean if there's good news for Canada? Personally, I thought that the opposition parties would make a bigger dent in the CAQ majority and maybe even reduce them to a minority. But the CAQ wins 41% of the vote and they got a strong majority with 90 seats. But let's think twice and unpack the numbers a little bit to see if this really is a strong mandate. Premier Legault says Quebecers send a strong message to Continuons. I know I talked about that in my previous video, but let's look at whether the results more accurately reveal a broken electoral system and what this really means for the next 4 years. Honestly, the most shocking part of election night was the victory speech. I'll play a clip for you in a minute, but just stay tuned. Do like, subscribe, and bell, and make sure that you tell me what you think in the comments. And be sure to stay to the end because I'm going to share with you why I think there was good news in what happened, not just for Quebec, but for actually all of Canada. So François Legault has a stronger majority, the largest we've seen in decades in Quebec, and even more power to do whatever he wants. And he'll need it because he's managing another crisis. That is the looming recession, a struggling economy, and a divided, angry population that's struggling to make ends meet. Not to mention that he has again pledged to fix a broken healthcare system. The same broken healthcare system that has been mismanaged since before he was health minister 20 years ago. Not only is it broken, but we're missing 4,000 to 6,000 nurses and 800,000 Quebecers don't have a family doctor. So yeah, the campaign was divisive. It was all about identity politics and dividing people on language and immigration. And the premier literally ignored 1.6 million English-speaking Quebecers. He wouldn't even debate in English. Then he bought the votes, promising to give Quebecers $500 cash and give seniors $2,000 to help with the cost of living. Well, it worked. In my humble opinion, he'd be better to remember that almost 60% of Quebecers, that's 2.8 million people, did not vote for him or the CAQ party. And what's worse is that 33% of Quebecers, another 2 million voters, are so fed up or disenfranchised and discouraged that they didn't even vote. He repeated the words Continuons in his victory speech more time than I can count, but I'll admit I did see a different man in that victory speech, which made me wonder where was this François Legault for the last 4 years while he was passing laws to take away the charter rights of Quebecers and disrespecting the English-speaking Quebecers as well as the Indigenous and the immigrant communities. His speech showed a man who was breathing a sigh of relief. He was relaxed, he was smiling, he was laughing, and he did offer a few conciliatory tones tempered with some wise words. It looked like he was trying to build bridges. And I got the impression that maybe he felt robbed or derailed of his premiership by the pandemic and appeared kind of grateful to have a second chance. Now, he knows he's got some mending to do with Quebecers, and he tried to extend an olive branch to the other opposition leaders. Well, that's kind of normal, because he said that if elections are divisive, well, we still have more things in common than divide us. And that all sounds really good until he said this. Watch the clip.
So, when I say that Quebecers form a great nation, I mean all Quebecers, from all regions, of all ages, of all origins. I'm going to be the premier of all Quebecers.
That's quite a statement and a lofty goal. I think most of the English media were absolutely stunned by it. I think, like me, they were wondering, where was this guy during the last 4 years? I mean, those are nice words, but there's a backlog of anger from various parts of the communities about his decisions. Mr. Legault, it'll be virtually impossible to get all Quebecers to trust you after you betrayed them. I mean, how will immigrants ever trust you when your immigration minister called them lazy, unwilling to work or integrate? And how will the 1.6 million English-speaking Quebecers ever trust you again after you tried to take control of their English language school boards, imposed Bill 96, and made speaking English a crime for small businesses? I mean, what'll you say in 6 months when no one can get healthcare services or government services in English, and that's protected by the Charter? How will you look people in the eye and make them feel like all Quebecers instead of second-class citizens? When I watched that speech by François Legault, I can't tell if they were genuinely conciliatory words. Maybe he was just breathing a sigh of relief after a really tough campaign facing protesters in the streets, or if it was a skilled bullsugar of a 32-year politician. Most Quebecers don't even see it coming, to be honest. They don't understand the ramifications of Bill 96 and how it'll make their lives and businesses more difficult. The ones that do understand it, honestly, are seriously thinking of leaving Quebec. Where have we seen that before? But personally, I refuse to be driven out of the province that my ancestors helped build, and I won't be driven out of Quebec like my parents were in 1979 after Bill 101. Will there be a mass exodus of businesses too? Probably. I guess time will tell. So if you're still with me, let's look at the numbers and see what they say about how Quebec really voted, because I do think that there is some good news for the future. Now, all the opposition parties agreed that the electoral system is broken, democracy is sick, and the seat count does not represent the intention of Quebec voters. The fact is, our first past the post system was designed for 2 or 3 parties, not 10, or in this case 20, 27. So we're always going to be victims of the split. So now think twice, Canada, because the argument is exactly the same on the federal level, where Conservatives consistently get the majority of votes, but not the seats. And it's no accident now that Justin Trudeau is dropping in the polls and that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have the momentum, that Justin and Jagmeet are now collaborating. They want to fix the electoral system, but not in a good way. I think I'll have to make another video about that. But anyway, so there is an obvious electoral distortion in Quebec. Premier Legault knows this since he signed a pledge 4 years ago to change the electoral system so that it would be more representative. All the opposition leaders in their speeches pointed this out, not because they lost, but because the seats are really disproportional to the actual voter intention. So let's look at that. For example, 59% of the population voted for another party other than the CAQ, but the opposition parties only ended up with 28% of the seats. The CAQ had 41% of the vote, but ended with 90 seats, and that's 72% of the total seats. So thinking twice again, I find it a kind of ironic that 41% equals roughly 1.6 million votes, which is a minority of the population, and it happens to equal the minority population of the English-speaking community. So put another way, if all the English-speaking or bilingual Quebecers banded together, technically they could have won government. Anyway, so the distortion becomes really obvious when you see that the Liberals under Dominique Anglade got 14% of the vote and 21 seats. Then the Quebec Solidaire got 15% of the vote, which was 40,000 votes more than the Liberals, but they only ended up with 10 seats, or about 9% of the total. The Parti Québécois also got close at 14% of the vote, 9,000 more votes than the Liberals, but they only got 3 seats. And then the Conservatives, they got close too at 13%, but got 0 seats. So let's take a few seconds to look at what the vote representation looks like in a graph. As you can see, all of the opposition parties represent roughly the same percentage of the vote, but one gets 21 seats, another 10, another gets 3 seats, and one gets 0 seats. So maybe it's finally time to have that conversation about fixing the electoral system so that all Quebecers could be represented. But don't hold your breath. As Éric Duhaime said during the campaign, if we can't be represented in the Assembly, then we'll have to represent ourselves on the streets. And I think there is more good news in this election, though. The separatist independence Parti Québécois has actually dropped to historic lows. They went from 10 seats to only 3. So perhaps this sends a clear message that the younger generations weren't buying into the old divisive arguments of their grandparents, and people are generally done with dragging the separatism argument into the future. Most Quebecers want some level of sovereignty or independence in decision-making, but they don't want to separate from Canada. Now, the Quebec Solidaire is the farthest left orange union socialist party, and they didn't make any real gains either, despite having a charismatic leader who was well-spoken and spoke on the environment. They resisted losing seats to the CAQ, but perhaps the majority of Quebecers are far more concerned about the cost of living and the economy, and they don't want to pay higher taxes to pay for billions of dollars in environmental spending. And that may be a signal to the rest of Canada. The Liberal leader Dominique Anglade got a real wake-up call this election. Now, she is the official opposition, but she lost a lot in this election. Last month, she had 31 seats, and now she's lost 10 of those seats and sits only with 21 seats. Could this be a signal to the federal Liberals and Justin Trudeau? Time will tell. Clearly, her momentum was going in the wrong direction, and English Quebecers sent a clear message that they're not going to be taken for granted. You can't just talk out of both sides of your mouth to English and French. So there are 3 other parties that are welcoming and defending them, and the New Conservatives under Éric Duhaime have now vowed to repeal Bill 96 and end the language games for good. Now, in my opinion, even if Éric Duhaime didn't win any seats, he accomplished something pretty extraordinary. In 1 year, he went from virtually unknown and a new party to running a major campaign neck and neck in the polls with the other opposition parties. So it seems many Quebecers are watching and looking for another strong opposition voice, and that's good for democracy. No doubt Éric Duhaime and the Quebec Conservative movement has the momentum, and they're going to build the new party. I mean, they started from 0 members and $500, and they ended up with the most memberships, donations in the bank, and 13% of the vote. Éric Duhaime says that he's only in the first period of the hockey game, and he's giving Quebecers a message of hope and unity and respect for all Quebecers, and he is becoming known for bringing new ideas to the table, so he's not going anywhere. Look, it's no secret that I'm a fan of this straight-talking man of the people, but keep an eye out for him, because I predict that even without any seats in the legislature, he'll continue to be the strongest voice holding François Legault's feet to the fire, even if he has to do it on social media or standing in the street. So tell me in the comments if this made you think twice, and if you're discouraged or encouraged, or maybe you just don't care. And do check out some of the other videos on Think Twice Canada's YouTube. Anyway, until next time, think twice, Quebec.